Hey guys, Cody here with Thistledowns TV. I'm hanging out in my garden today, getting ready to do a little bit of pruning. So I figured I'd make a quick video for you to share some of the pruning tips that I like to use to help improve the health of my plants and also increase the output of my garden. But before we go any further, I just want to make sure you hit that like button, also subscribe to our channel, and also check us out on Instagram at Thistledowns Farm for more farm and garden content. All right, let's jump right into it. Tip number one, make sure you're using clean pruning shears. You want to make sure they're clean because you don't want to be transferring any sort of diseases from plant to plant throughout your garden. So clean your shears before and after every use. I just use Dawn dish soap and hand wash them in the sink. But some people spray them down with hydrogen peroxide, other people put them in the dishwasher. Whatever you got to do, just make sure they're clean. All right, let's focus in on our eggplants here for tip number two. We're going to get rid of all of these leaves that are just hanging on the ground. These leaves are doing nothing beneficial at this point for these eggplants. All they're doing is sucking up valuable nutrients that could be going to these healthy leaves and also the fruits that are developing. And the other thing they're doing hanging out on the ground is just increasing the risk of developing diseases in our plants. So we're going to go ahead and just chop off all of these sickly looking lower leaves. Now what the plant's going to do, now that all these sickly looking leaves are gone, it's going to push all the nutrients and moisture up to these healthy looking leaves, and it's going to push the nutrients also into the fruit. All right, so for tip number three, we're going to focus in on our tomato plants here. Before we actually start pruning, I just want to give you a very quick tomato plant anatomy lesson because that'll make what I'm talking about a lot easier to understand. So essentially, when you look at a tomato plant, it has the main stem right here. And then coming off the stem, there are a couple different sets of branches. There's branches that angle perpendicular or even kind of angle downward that have the leaves on them. So these are the leaf branches. And then there's other branches, kind of like this one right here, that typically angles upward, and these develop the fruits. And then the suckers, the ones that grow in between, these can be either fruit bearers or leaf bearers. And at the very, very top of the main stem, you have what's called the growing tip. And this is the part that keeps growing upward and develops more main stem along the way. So you absolutely don't want to prune off this growing tip, or that'll signal to the plant to stop growing. So when pruning tomato plants, there's a couple goals you're trying to accomplish. The first goal, much like the eggplant, is to get rid of all the leaves that are diseased looking, that aren't providing any benefit to the plant itself and just sucking up valuable energy from the fruits and the healthy leaves of the plant. So we're going to go through and find, I don't know if you can see it, we're going to go through and find all the leaves that look sickly or diseased, and we're going to get rid of all those sets of leaves. Anything that looks like this, we're going to get rid of. And the other thing you're trying to accomplish when pruning your tomato plants is to be able to increase the ventilation and air circulation through your plants. So if anything that looks super bushy, we're just going to go in there and thin out some of those inner sets of leaves. And finally, we're just going to go in and find any of these little suckers that aren't established yet, and we're just going to snip them off with our fingers. Just like that. And a little bonus tip about these suckers, you can actually snip off these lower leaves, stick this end in water, and in a few days it'll actually start to sprout its own roots. And then you can actually just plant that right back into the ground, and you have a whole new tomato plant just with this little sucker. And that's because it has a very high totipotency. All right, so for our next pruning tip, we're going to focus in on our basil plants. I have my basil companion planted all around my tomato plants, and I'll do a different video on companion planting. But for now, I just want you to focus in on the buds on top of these basil plants. I was away for a few days, I neglected my basil, and as you can see, it started budding. So my tip for pruning basil is to prevent your basil from flowering until the very end of the season. So what you want to do is every single time you see buds like this, you want to snip them right off. Just like that. So kind of like opposite train of thought from our eggplants and our peppers and our tomatoes, where we want the plant to push most of its energy into the fruits and the flowers, we do not want the basil plants to push most of its energy into the bud. We want the plant to push most of the energy into the leaves. So we're going to get rid of these buds. So I'm going to go through and just snip off any of the buds that I see growing. And another quick tip when pruning basil, when you're harvesting it, you always want to make sure there's at least one true set of leaves underneath the junction where you're harvesting. So say for instance I was going to harvest these leaves right here off this stem. If you look closely, there's another true set of leaves right here. So if I'm going to harvest from this stem, I'm going to harvest above this true set of leaves, and I'm going to leave these leaves intact. I hope that makes sense to you. Always leave one true set of leaves. And one more little pruning tip. This one's a flower pruning tip. I have my marigolds companion planted with my cucumbers and peas. And so every couple days I just go out and I find the dead blossoms and I do what's called deadheading my marigolds, and I just pick off these dead blossoms. And once again, that's going to cause the plant to stop pushing nutrients to that dead blossom and actually push them to the healthier parts of the plant. And here's one more right here. You just pick them out and toss them. Alright guys, hopefully you found this video helpful. These are just a few simple pruning tips that I use in my garden that I think work really well for me. So give them a try, and if you have any questions or comments, hit me up in the comment section below. Otherwise, take care and happy gardening.